Let's talk about the Republic of Ireland in a bit more detail. And before we get to that, I'm going to actually talk about the League of Ireland, because we had a couple of texts in yesterday. Nothing on Bowes Rovers, 2 red cards, 3 goals, 2 screamers, league champions elect out of the cup, cup wide open, Rovers out of Europe and the cup in a week. Surely that's a major story, said Botox95, BOHTOX95 is how that YouTube user spells his name.
Yeah, could have been kind of Botoxic as well for some of the atmosphere on Sunday, I think.
I heard you talking about this and giving out about players on the show last night. I'm like, do we not want our players to be in any way? I mean...
Well, Bowes issued a statement, actually, which, to be fair, was completely corroborated what we were saying, and that, you can't at one level... The League of Ireland has been very, very poor at attracting women to watch the games, and this probably preceded the...
Tell everybody who didn't watch or hasn't seen what happened.
I can only relay what happened, because I wasn't really in the section of the Jody stand where Danny Mandrew, an ex-Bohemians player, was getting a lot of abuse, but it was more so alleged abuse in relation to his girlfriend and stuff like that. That, I think a lot of people would say it went over the top. Damien O'Mara from RT, I see him often tweeting about bringing his young daughter to Bowes games, for example. So I'm thinking, well, do you want to bring your kids to games like that? Do you want to bring your mother, your girlfriend? The problem at the moment...
Well, I mean, the women can see things that men can see too. We don't have to protect the pretty little heads. Do you know what I mean?
I don't know, though. Like, if you have one stand where everyone is in, like, generally, I think in football games, the more vocal, shall we say, section should be in the shed behind the goal or something like that, where that stuff kind of goes on, but it's a different atmosphere. And then you've like a family stand or something like that, and you can see even in Britain now they're moving towards a bit of terracing in grounds and that. If you throw everyone into the same stand, like a lot of the Bowes fans, let's just say, were enjoying themselves prior to the game as well, and would have had a few beers, and they were in particularly kind of raucous mood. And Danny Mandrew, who's obviously invited this to some extent because he left Shamrock Rovers, or left Bowes to go to Shamrock Rovers, but then he reacted, he seemingly, the videos would suggest he picked something off the ground and tossed it into the stand, which was an utterly stupid thing to do. I haven't heard if there's any, like, what repercussions will be from that, but it was a raucous atmosphere, only 800 people there. Some of the stewards are effectively fans at the games. I think some of the Shamrock Rovers players would have felt that, they were a little bit aggrieved with some of the abuse directed at them. But I guess that's Bowes Rovers.
Okay, so that was part of what happened, but there was also significant enough rows between the coaching staff.
Yeah, that was actually, for me, that was kind of the highlight of the day. And I know we did a podcast with Dan McDonald yesterday, and he said he loves this stuff. And I kind of do as well, even though I kind of do wonder, like, from a coaching perspective, should it be happening? But Chris Benyon, who is the Bowes goalkeeping coach, and I'm not exactly sure what the context was here, but as they're walking off the pitch, and as you're walking off the pitch in Dalymount, you have to walk past effectively all the fans. He was having a row with Stephen Bradley. Glenn Cronin, Bradley's assistant, then effectively squared up to Benyon, kind of like, head to head, without not headbutting each other, but kind of like going within an inch of each other's head or whatever. And then Philly McMahon, who's like involved in the Bowes coaching staff, he came in to break the whole thing up. He was the peacemaker, and I was like, how can I reconcile this with the last image I have of Philly McMahon is like semi-naked in Croke Park after his jersey was all but ripped off, acting as a peacemaker. And then at the end of the game, as the Bowes fans were singing along to Yes Sir I Can Boogie, Philly McMahon was videoing this, like, because he thought it was so cool. And I was like, you've gone from 82,000 people normally at Croke Park to 800 at Bowes, and you still think it's worth filming, and it's quite cool. So there was a lot going on, and the game itself was quite mad as well. 2 unbelievable goals from Bowes, and terrible week for Shamrock Rovers, Ger, to be honest. They were fighting wars in 3 fronts, and now they're only fighting wars in 1, and they lost the bonus of getting all that money that they would have gotten in Europe as well. Okay, but the European exit is far more important than the Cup exit, right? Yeah, absolutely. Like the Cup, they surrendered the Cup last year to, a Dundalk team that obviously had a pretty poor season, but turned it on a bit in the Cup. But, there was maybe a European prize money, extra prize money of $2.5 million. But I think more so than that. I mean, obviously the money's important, but they were found out a bit in Europe, I think. A lot of their players, the average age of the team was, give or take, was 30 in the second leg against Flora Talon on Thursday. And I think that if you get away with that, that's fine. But I think they didn't really have the legs. They didn't have enough pace in the team team. They didn't have a plan B, and they were found out by a good team, but a team they should have been capable of beating. And I think they'll have some soul searching this week, because
they're going to win the league, though.
They'll almost certainly win the league, partly because none of the other teams is actually close enough to them, and arguably not consistent enough. I do look at Bows and think they should also be looking at why they dropped so many points around their own European run in the league, because like they made 8 changes at home to Longford when they were really closing the gap in Shamrock Rovers, and if they'd made, even though they'd started the season badly, they did have a chance to really keep tabs with Rovers, and they've kind of blown that as well. They had a few bad performances in the league. St. Pat's have a lot of injuries at the moment. They've almost their entire back 4 out. Rovers have the resources, and they're going to comfortably win the league. But I do wonder, if they win the league this season, how they'll rate it out of 10, because that's all they're going to win, and Europe, I think, was in the disappointing bracket for them, to be honest.
Okay, where is the league at the moment? We have this conversation once every 6 months.
Yeah, like the European escapades, I suppose, they did end on a bit of a damp squib of a note. In that Bows went out after looking like they might go through. Dundalk went out after looking that they might go through, and then Shamrock Rovers went out very meekly, losing both their legs against Flor Talon. But by and large, I think it's in a very good place. There are interesting figures doing the rounds yesterday about Ireland exporting more under-18 players to other leagues than any other country in the world, which is bonkers.
Double-edged sword there, isn't it? It's like
we're producing young players,
yeah,
but we're obviously not keeping them.
Yeah.
But you know, that I think it's a good and a bad thing, as you say, that we are producing these players. Our relevance in terms of the top flight in England has probably never been less. So we do, with Brexit now, have to try to find a system where we keep these young players in the country. But you know, by and large, I think we're in a good place. I think there might be a change in government support for maybe funding for academies in this country. In fairness, sure, the clubs in Europe did really well. They punched above their weight. Bows to beat PAOK at home was a great result. Dundalk went toe-to-toe with Vitesse Arnhem, despite the fact Dundalk are second last in the league at the moment. So there's a bit more depth maybe than maybe people say there is. And I think the standard in general is good. But, you know, we've still a long, long way to go.
OK, let's talk about the Republic of Ireland and the performance requirements over the 3 matches. We're playing Portugal. We expect to lose against Portugal. We're playing Azerbaijan. We expect to win against Azerbaijan. And then the third game, I think, will... assuming that we don't compete by Azerbaijan. The third game, I think, will decide how people feel about where we are at the moment. Is that fair?
It depends. Like, I don't think it's inconceivable that we get a draw in Portugal. I think there's a bit of a theory when you're coming off a big tournament that you'll be a little bit... I don't know, maybe not 100%. Maybe, I don't know if that's a mental thing or whatever.
It's not inconceivable, but...
It's not inconceivable.
But it would be a massive surprise.
I think we've roughly a 20% chance, if not maybe slightly less, of getting a result over there. It'd be a surprise, but our performances in some of the games against better opposition, I think, have been good. Now, the quality they have in attacking areas versus what we have, you know, there may be a lot of debate about Ronaldo going to Man United, but like Portuguese media are probably not debating like Troy Parrott's performances in the third tier of English football. Yet, you know, he's probably in line to play because he's basically doing more than anyone else at the moment in our attacking areas. So that's where we're at. If we perform well in Portugal and beat Azerbaijan, then maybe we get a draw against Serbia. I think, like, does anyone realistically think we're going to get out of this group? So at one level, Kenny's building for the Euros, but at the other level, he wants to be there.
He doesn't have the contract to build for the Euros yet. That's the thing.
Yeah, that's the challenge. But at the same time, like, one-off results are like. So, what are we doing here? Are we building for the Euros, or we're not going to qualify for the World Cup?
That's the fundamental question. That is the fundamental question that people are going to be answering. And they're going to be making their own minds up in the referendum on Kenny on the back of these 3 games, because he did have the camp where he had the players, or many of the players, and the opportunity to inculcate what he wanted. Now, there were injuries and there were definitely people unavailable for that, but in summer there was the opportunity for the first time at the end of last season to get people together properly and to have some kind of normal experience. Unfortunately, it seems everybody has not got vaccinated, and I'm shocked that you'll be a professional footballer who's asked to represent your country, who's going to be involved in international travel, who's been involved in missed games. I'm shocked that you've chosen not to get vaccinated, right? All that stuff about it being personal, that's fine, but actually that says a lot about what you think about your responsibilities to people around you. And for me, that speaks a little bit about whether or not you're going to be a good teammate into the future. I would say that. Why?
Yeah, I tend to agree.
Well, then we should say this stuff.
Yeah.
If you're not getting vaccinated, you don't care about the people around you.
Why do you think this average player, whoever he is, player X, is not getting vaccinated?
I don't know. But it's not like the whole. Johnny Liu wrote a piece recently about how it's easy for professional sports people. He was at a cricket match and somebody was talking about Julian Assange, and Johnny Liu was laughing about the fact that these people were so prone to hearing conspiracy theories because they're on their own hotel rooms all the time. They're young, they're curious, they have access to endless amounts of information and technology, and so they're actually a really good cohort of people for conspiracy theorists to target because, you know, maybe they didn't spend a lot of time in education. I mean, I'm sorry, I just don't buy it. It's essentially, you're just saying these people are thick. Like, I don't buy it. Like, giving people a free pass for not getting vaccinated or for not doing what they're supposed to do to help us all get back to the point where we can all go back about our lives properly, I'm not giving them a free pass. I refuse to say that you're okay, that it is just a personal decision, because it's not a personal decision. It's actually a collective decision that we all need to make together to be able to go about our lives so that it's safe for us to do so.
That's kind of implying that we should be dictatorial about this, son, that it should be mandatory. Do you know what I mean? Do you think it should?
Well, loads of vaccines for kids are essentially mandatory, and you've seen how measles has become a real issue again. Measles kills children. It leaves them blind. It is a horrific thing, and there are people out there who are easy-ozy about it because of the anti-vaxxers. It has been a plague on our society. Like, we mandatory vaccination is something that we're like, oh, you can't do that. Jesus, we can't make everybody do this thing, but we make it mandatory to wear a seatbelt.
Yeah, so it's kind of like we're
What's the
afraid.
difference?
We're afraid to be seen.
Yeah, there's going to be a backlash about
not
this.
Be liberal in terms of our democracy or whatever. Like, sometimes I think, you know, when the government instructs people to do things and makes them do it, often it's better. And like, for example, dictatorships are bad, but shit gets done. Whereas here, like, the anti-vaxxers are complete.
Let's ban smoking indoors. Oh no, you can't do that. It's my freedom. It's like, well, actually, it's not. Okay, grand, yeah, fine, and everybody improves. Anyway, look, we got sidetracked there. But
it's very early in the morning to be having a debate about anti-vaxxers.
It's not. It's like exactly the time to have it. So as a result of that, I think it's pretty.
I kind of agree with you, to be honest. I don't know what to say to these people. I got my vaccination as quickly as I could. I think we've a collective responsibility in the Ireland squad. If you're causing issues with it, that's another level altogether.
Yeah, then don't come back.
But Kenny hasn't been quite as strong as you on.
Well, I suppose he's got to be practical about it and think that at some point I'm going to need players down the line. So look, I understand.
Does your view change at all if you've already had COVID?
No, because you can still give it to people.
Yeah.
Like, you'll still be a close contact. You'll get it again. Like, oh, I've got antibodies. It's the elixir of life. No, it's not. It really isn't. Like, and we all know that because we can read from reputable sources that actually still get the vaccine because it's going to help prevent the spread.
Yeah.
Anyway, from an Ireland perspective, I do think these 3 games are important, but we haven't committed to Kenny yet, and I think that the FAI haven't committed to Kenny yet, and like, the FAI still has within the organisation, as far as we know, the people who were leaking against Stephen Kenny around the video. So, like, the FAI needs to make a decision. Are we for or against this manager? And I'd say these 3 games are going to help a long way to deciding what they think, because if you've seen the drumbeat of announcements from the FAI, they're starting to get sponsorships back on track. They made the announcement about paying the women equal amounts as to the men's team internationally. So the mood music is going in one direction. If we get draw, win, draw, I think Kenny gets a new deal. If we get defeat, draw, defeat, I think they won't give Kenny a new contract. They'll keep him on the hook and they'll play that out for as long as possible. But I think that if these 3 games don't go well and the new chief executive and the board don't see that things are heading in the right direction with the senior international team, then I fear that we could be headed for some kind of stereotypical Irish football reaction where Mick McCarthy comes back and gets the gig again, or Big Sam gets the gig. Like, that's what's at stake over these 3 games, I think.
Yeah, but like, do the results matter that much, or is it the performances at this stage? In that we're so far behind in this group. If we played very well, And even if we got 2 valiant defeats against the 2 big teams and beat Azerbaijan, like if we beat Azerbaijan but play terribly in the game, I don't think that's good. If we play well over the 3 games, it's about showing progress. I mean, if you're going to be as strictly results-based as that, that wouldn't be my football philosophy, particularly.
But it has been.
Yeah,
for multi-generations, it has been the approach of the FAI.
Well, we'll say, like, if that were the approach, Mick O'Neill would have been shoved out the door, from Northern Ireland, and Alex Ferguson, we wouldn't even know who he is, So you do have to give time. I think Kenny is a prisoner to the fact that he has so many young players who need time, and at this stage, we're still unsure as to how good. Like Aaron Connolly was a great white hope, and now there are serious doubts about him. Troy Parrott has had to go to League One. Adam Ida has still attained very little experience, even though he has a chance. There are 3 best strikers pretty much at the moment. I mean, if you're going to bring on Collins or whatever, like that's not the Kenny sort of philosophy at all. He's completely anathema to the way we want to play. We need to see a collective belief, and we need to see that the young players are coming through. Our 2 goalkeepers are exceptionally young. You can see. I think the Randolph situation is evidence of where Kenny is going. Like, in that, I'm thinking of the future here, not necessarily the next game. I think the way he's handled the Randall situation, and that's the way I would approach it, because we've a scatter of very good centre backs potentially coming through. Defensively, we're good. We've 2 potentially world-class goalkeepers, but we've massive problems in midfield and up front. And there's only so much he can do in that short space of time. We're going to need time. But we need progress more so than the way we're playing.
So give him the contract. I would argue give him the contract, right?
I would be in that camp. I could obviously see why you wouldn't be in that camp. I think it should be pointed out he's lost a scatter of players. He's lost 3 members of his backroom team, but also just so many issues with COVID and injuries and all that. Like, I'd give him something of a free pass for what's befallen him so far.
So, but from the FAI's perspective, because they're the ones who have the potential here to be the leaders and say, actually, you know what, we are building something proper here. We've put the commercial stuff in place. We've put our marketing stuff in place. We're backing the women's team properly, and we're going to back the senior international management team. And we're saying that this campaign is gone. We know it's gone. So it's the next campaign, and it's the extended Euros. Good chance that we'll qualify.
We've also been known to sack managers before. If Kenny gets a new contract, and there's nothing to say, and if he gets a new contract going into the Euros and it becomes a disaster, he can always get sacked.
Yeah, in the middle of it, but at least then.
Do you know what I mean? But I would agree with you. I think, like, given that gives us a long-term kind of blueprint as to where we're going here.
My problem with this is that it feels like that, and because there is clearly voices within the FAI who are not in favour of Stephen Kenny, who are not helping him, and who have been leaking against him.
A voice, anyway.
Well, we don't know.
We can only speculate.
Yeah, well, I mean,
I think
they've done nothing about it. They've done nothing about it. Yeah. So, I think that ratchets up the pressure on results, and you have people in the media calling for results, and it's like, well, okay, grand. Yeah, but who are you going to get, lads? Let's go back to the caveman football and see where that gets us with this group of players. Like, because the stars that they keep telling us about who are so sensational can't get games in the Premier League or the Championship at the moment. The ones who are like, oh, what about these great players who aren't getting in the team? Stephen Kenny's not picking them. It's like, well, where are they playing football? Are they at Man United? Are they at Liverpool? I see Real Madrid are in for those guys now at the moment. So, like, I think...
it's one thing, though, you got to give Stephen Kenny credit for. Like, it pissed me off a lot about Martin O'Neill, where he consistently spoke about not having Robbie Keane around. Stephen Kenny has never spoken about the players not available to him or the lack of stars. He's extolled the qualities of the players he had. Now, that rings a little bit hollow if they're crap on the Wednesday night. But I think over time that works. I think his man management skills, people say, oh, he only did it at the League of Ireland, he only did this, he only did that. He still did things in Europe with Dundalk that went way beyond the station of the League of Ireland manager, and he made sort of ordinary enough to decent players go toe-to-toe with world-class players and match them in many respects. And that's kind of what he needs to do here, albeit in a dressing room full of players that are on a lot of money and maybe have the trappings of a different lifestyle. But the players, I think, will believe in Stephen Kenny. I think the coaching staff behind him, generally the players seem to like them, and give them time. I think give them time, because we're necessarily focusing on young players now because we don't really have anyone else. And if it's a question of playing James Collins because he might do a better job than Troy Parrott over 45 minutes. I'd play Troy Parrott because he's the future. James Collins isn't.
Well, imagine if Troy Parrott, after 10 caps, the penny drops and he's like, oh, I've got this now. I completely understand what we're supposed to do. But we've denied him that because we've decided that he needs to win this game against Azerbaijan or his job is on the line. And that's how this conversation has been, I think, is being framed, and is watch the pressure ratchet up. No one's ratcheting the pressure up ahead of the Portugal game because no one expects Ireland to do anything. But if we get beaten, I think we'll get beaten 4-1, to be honest. And I think that's the type of thing.
I don't see that at all, actually. I think our defenders go into the game in good nick. A lot will depend on how the midfield play, because they're going to be very hard work. I don't think we'll be disgraced at all, to be honest. I think it'll be closer than that. But some answers have been wrong before. But like even that game, say if Troy Parrott or Adam Eade or one of these, like the likes of a striker in a game like that where you're so under the cosh, there's going to be so much pressure on them to hold up the ball, make runs into channels with the midfield behind them that has so much to prove. Like there are a lot of question marks against them that Kenny can do very little about at this stage because their just experience isn't there.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of negatives as well.
The playing stock is not as good as it needs to be. There seems to be a good crop of youngsters coming through, but it could be 5 years before they're actually playing significant amounts of football in the Championship, and that might be their level. And I think the whole point about international football is that tends to be good enough to build something.
Yeah, I think the FAI, in fairness, I think since Kenny's been involved, and when Kenny came involved with the under-21s and the likes of Tom Moe and lads at the underage level, I think there is more of a coherent strategy in terms of the way they're playing. In general, I think there's more of a passing style of football that even preceded Kenny getting the international job, and I think that will bear fruit in time, because we cannot go back to the style of football that we had. Tommy Conlon had an interesting article Sunday about the Irish place in the national psyche now compared to where it was.
Football teams.
Yeah, and it wasn't like we're not where we were. You know, the Irish rugby team is in a place that the Irish football team isn't now, and that there's kind of a lot of indifference, I think, towards them because we've been bad for so long. And we've been unwatchable as well at times. Yeah. And we need, but you can't fix that overnight. And I think, a lot. In 10 or 20 years' time, Ireland will probably be a majority black team, for example. Then we'll have a totally different national DNA in the way we play. We'll have, like, all these kids coming through. You can see it in underage. We'll be far better, I think, than we have been now. But it's going to take time. And we're a totally different country to the one that Jack Charlton managed.